Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October meeting of the Naperville Astronomical Association. I'm Tony Armalis, the Vice President of the club, and I'd like to welcome everybody to it. Thank you for joining us, whether you're a member or just out of interest. And to ask questions this evening, all you have to do is on Facebook, go to the comments and put your question in there. Or if you're at our website, or if you want to send an email to questions@naperastro.org via email. Brief notes. I just want to go over a couple of three things real quick, and we'll talk more about them during our business meeting after our presentation. We've finished pretty much the observatory, and we just got a few things to finish up next week. We're going to do them, but I'd like to personally thank Drew Carhart, Kurt Eichel, Ed Armstrong, Norm Jerome, Bob Swanson, Leslie Wolf, and Jim Hopkins for coming out and working with us. And I'll give you more details of this during our business meeting. The next thing is, during the business meeting, I'd like to everybody know that we're forming a volunteer committee to consider changes to our Constitution resulting from our tax status, now that we are a bona fide nonprofit. Under the Constitution, the committee is required to meet within the next month. In view of present circumstances, though, you can't have live meetings and they'll be held electronically. Any member who would like to be part of this committee should send an email to info@naperastro.org no later than next Tuesday. Upcoming events we have are Tuesday the 20th will be our Astronomy Fundamentals program at 7:30 regular time, and the subject will be choosing your first telescope. For those of you new to the hobby, this is a good time for you to learn something about it. And our November monthly meeting will have a date change due to the national elections. So it will be on Tuesday, November 10th. That'll be covered in the newsletter and it'll be up on our website also. And you can go to our calendar at naperastro.org/calendar to look at any events coming up. Pop-up events posted on Facebook and club members message board also. You can find us there and follow us on Facebook. Okay, this evening we're going to talk about Charles Lee Mudd, principal attorney at Mudd Law. He's going to talk about protecting future dark skies, a report from the Satellite Frontline. As most of us know, Starlink has been authorized more than 4,000 satellites and another 40,000 and another 40,000 for OneWeb, and other companies such as Amazon are looking to do the same thing. This is going to impact professional and amateur astronomy in a negative way. And over the last year, various interesting parties have come together to address these issues. Charles is the founder and principal of Mudd Law, a firm recognized internationally for its internet and space-focused litigation and transactional practice. He's also a current new member of our club. He regularly speaks and teaches internet and space law domestically and internationally. Charles will report from the front lines on the efforts and discuss how you, the amateur astronomy community, can help define the future of space policy and protect our dark skies. So Charles, if you're ready, take over for us.
Very good. I am ready, and I'm going to share my screen here. And let me get to here. So first, I do want to thank the Naperville Astronomical Association for having me speak tonight. It's an honor. I'm very pleasantly enjoying being a member of the NAA, and it's really exciting to have this opportunity to come to you and talk about a lot about what I have been doing in the space policy sector. So, let me back up. So the title, Protecting Future Dark Skies, a report from the Satellite Frontline, that's kind of the blurb title that grabs perhaps some attention, but really on a more practical level, it's advocacy for astronomers. And you see that I have the amateur stricken because we're really talking about advocacy for all astronomers. Anybody that enjoys space, that's what we're going to be looking for here. I can move this out of the way. So as was mentioned, we all probably know what Starlink is. If you don't know what Starlink is, it's a constellation of satellites launched by, or going to be launched by, SpaceX. We probably all are familiar with SpaceX by now, and Elon Musk. Putting aside controversial statements that he may say from time to time, there's no question that SpaceX has really advanced commercial space and advanced the ability to get, for example, to the ISS and back with returnable rockets. Amazing technology. But nonetheless, they also have Starlink, and it caused a number of concerns when it launched last year in about May of 2019. One of the biggest concerns is light pollution. And I'm going to talk a little bit about both aspects of light pollution, terrestrial and space, but it really comes down to, at least from the astronomer's perspective, light pollution. When we see an image such as this, which is really one of the first images from 2019 that grabbed everybody's attention, and in particular grabbed a lot of the professional astronomers' attention, and an outcry and finding out what's going on, what is this, that's going to be a problem. And when you think about, all right, this is 60 here, and they're planning on launching, or at least they have a license to launch, close to 40,000+. I don't know that they're actually going to launch that many, and certainly they're not going to launch that many anytime soon. It'll be staggered. But nonetheless, we start to see the problem in taking images of the sky. I have to give credit to the first, Marco Langbroek, for taking that image, having that video actually, and his blog is really interesting on a lot of matters related to this. So I do recommend that you check that out. This other photograph that wasn't so well taken, in fact, some of the stars are blurred. That was mine, but you can see nonetheless the streaks of Starlink going across the sky. Actually, this was taken in my backyard, and I had not been set up to take photos of Starlink. As it happened, I had the camera set to take long exposure of the night with my zoom lens. And as I'm walking back into the house, I turn up into the sky, and I've been working on policy matters related to Starlink for some time, and I hadn't even seen them yet, live, that is. So it took me by surprise, and I ran in to get the kids to come out, my wife to come out to see the Starlink satellites that I had been talking about. And they're, a little bit of oohs and ahs in the sense that, okay, now we've seen them, but as they were going by, I was trying to get it. I quickly thought to get an image, and that's why it's of that nature rather than a shorter time on the camera. Here's another from the Lowell Observatory, and you can see more dramatically here that if at the Lowell Observatory we're starting to take images of the night sky, the impact from the streaks, the light from the satellites really become a problem. And there have been a lot of discussions about what can be done about that, and I'm going to get into those in just a moment. This is a more recent photograph, and it's not as perhaps blurry. This one is blown up, but this one is Neowise with the Starlink, giving a photo bomb of that. But again, you can see where the issue is if we happen to be taking these photographs, trying to take these images, whether by our camera or by a telescope with CCD imaging, we're going to run into problems, or astronomers are going to run into problems. So that's Starlink, or those are the lights by Starlink. But what is Starlink beyond satellites coming from SpaceX? So this is an image courtesy of or from SpaceX. They didn't give it to me, but I'm giving credit to them. This is basically the set of 60 satellites. So what they do, the first launch happened to be 2 satellites, 2 Starlinks, the initial test launch, and then ever since then, more or less, they've been 60 satellites per launch. So this is the container with the satellites. They all come out together and then move apart. The actual satellite looks like this when its solar array is completely raised. It's about the size of a large kitchen table, so we're not talking CubeSats by any stretch of the imagination. And the solar array, you can tell, is quite huge. So, you know, when this happened, when this came out, in fact, a law student wrote a paper, let's sue SpaceX, let's sue the FCC, let's file litigation to stop this. Well, you know, you have to have a basis to do so. So when you look at the FCC, what happened, how did SpaceX suddenly get a license to do this? Well, they filled out an application with the Federal Communications Commission. You can see that the application date here, this one is 2016, and it's Space Exploration Holdings, which is SpaceX down here. And then this is just a larger image of that. The last action date in this particular instance was March 29th with a bond date of April 24th. So it gives us some information, but the date filed is November, going back to November 15th, 2016. And when applications, this is a license application. When an application is filed by a company, it's open for public comment. So you can look now, you can go and find the other filings related to the application, and there were a lot of them. There were a lot of comments about the SpaceX application. A lot of responses. You probably can't see the detail here, but there's Space Norway, Telset Canada, a law firm. SpaceX is responding to a lot of them. So there were a lot of filings, but nobody raised the issue from an astronomer's perspective. There could have been filings, but there weren't any. So part of a comment here, one of the comments happened to be from another presentation. How come astronomers are so late in raising the problem only after the first launches? Well, that's a good question. And I think it's because of a lack of awareness on the advocacy side and what actually can be done. And so that, while I'm talking about being on the front lines and the things that I've done, the purpose of this is to give you some tools, to give you information on what can be done, because I will say that we really do need assistance from the amateur astronomy community. And I know some of you are professional astronomers that I believe are members of NAA, but so that's again why I'm talking about all astronomers here. So again, May of 2019, this is the first major launch. It had a dramatic image going across the night sky. Astronomers responded, professional astronomers responded. And in the United States, the key professional astronomy organization, and I'm going to put an asterisk there because they actually have opened their membership up to the amateur or non-professional populace. So if you are interested, you can go to their website, and they do now have membership in that regard. So you don't necessarily need to be a professional astronomer. But the organization in the United States for American professional astronomers is the American Astronomical Society. And so they did come out with a policy statement right away. They started to get involved. At the time, there was a decadal survey. I'm not sure that you may know what a decadal survey is, but the National Academy of Sciences, every 10 years, and it's staggered over time, so it's not everything all in one year, but every 10 years, let's say for astronomy, it looks into the field, it looks at projects, it looks at the issues, where should the funding be directed? Well, I advocated that the decadal survey should be in looking at Starlink and looking at mega constellations. So again, let's take a step back. A satellite, we know, one satellite, all right, that's a satellite. A constellation is a set of satellites, usually by the same country or company that are interoperating together. A mega constellation is what we're talking about when we're looking at the Starlink system, where their application, their license with the US alone was for 12,000 satellites, and then they went to the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, through the FCC for an additional 40,000. That is a mega constellation. So I advocated that the decadal survey should be taking a look at this. The AAS did start to take a look at it. They were peripherally involved with the decadal survey, but the decadal survey and the AAS started to look at it, having different talks about it. You can go to AAS.org and see more information, or just search AAS Starlink and it'll pull up those links. So there was a response from the professional astronomy community, and there actually ended up being a response from SpaceX. Now, we all might say anything about SpaceX. I think their technology is cool. I have some problems with Starlink, and I have some other problems with some of the other things going on. But I have to give SpaceX credit where credit is due, and they have been, at least facially, very responsive to the astronomy community. And so what they have started to do is look at ways that their satellites can mitigate. I believe that Elon Musk had maybe a flippant response when there was first a concern from astronomers, but that didn't last long, because it turns out he was even as surprised as to the brightness of the satellites. And I imagine that he is the one directing his company to be significantly involved in matters trying to mitigate the harm. And let me talk about a little bit of what they've done. So first is talking just about the way that the satellites are configured when they're in flight, when they're orbit raised. So there are different periods to the Starlink satellites. There's the orbit raise, where they're raising up to the particular orbit. Then they'll get to a parking orbit, and they'll wait in the parking orbit until eventually they rise to the operational orbit. So 3 different phases: the orbit raise, the parking orbit, and then the operational orbit. And what they've learned is that by rotating the satellites when they are maneuvering on an orbit raise to be a shark fin to the left, you see the example, rather than an open book, it eliminates some of the reflection. Now, when I first saw the Starlink and the solar array, rather, the bottom part there in the dark is a satellite. We'll get to a larger photo in a moment. But when I first saw that and saw the solar array, I thought that the solar array was the key concern. Not so much. It's also the satellite and the communication portion of the particular satellite, and we'll see in a moment. This gives you an image. These, again, are from SpaceX, of some of the issues relating to the solar reflectivity. So again, the light coming from the Starlink satellites that we see here is the solar light, the sun's light, reflecting off of not only the satellite, but the solar array. If they turn up at the top, if they turn the satellite at more of an angle, the sunlight is not reflected in a manner that's going to reflect down to Earth. So that's one thing that they've talked about doing. And then also with a shark fin, the way that it's done, the reflection is going to be, any that is, off of the solar array is going to be minimized significantly. Now, what then they also did is they started looking at the different technologies, and they came up with DarkSat. And so there was one satellite, it was a non-operational test satellite, where they basically darkened the portions of the satellite here to see if that would help. And it did mitigate it to some extent, but as we all know, dark absorbs light and thereby absorbs heat. And so while there's been some indication that the heat would not necessarily be that much of an issue for the satellite, SpaceX decided that that was not the best operational choice. So then they moved to VisorSat. So as we talked about, having the solar array up above back so that ideally it's reflecting away from Earth, then the portions, rather than having sunlight hit the reflected or reflective portions of the satellite, there would be visors that would block that particular light. So SpaceX is working on some technology to address and mitigate the situation. I asked, here's a link while I'm going to talk about something in just a moment. This is a link to where you can read more, see those photographs, read more about it. I was involved when SatCon 1, and that was between the AAS and the NSF, National Science Foundation's NOIR lab, put together SatCon 1. I attended as a public participant, and I was brought in to answer a couple questions where it came up policy-wise, but really I was there more as a, not as a participant, an observer. And they had two representatives from Starlink there. There were questions. One of the questions that I raised in the chat was whether or not the technology that SpaceX was developing would be available to the broader space community so that new companies or other satellite companies could adapt and use what Starlink had been developing. Because most of your satellite companies do not have the resources to do the R&D that SpaceX is investing in developing the technology to mitigate the light. So again, you've got to give credit to SpaceX for that they have been cooperative. Every satellite moving forward is going to be the VisorSat kind. So it's good, but it's not enough. So the broader response beyond just SpaceX is just one company within one country, the United States. So it's really not enough to rely on one company to mitigate the problem that's going to continue to arise. So there was a broader response. The AAS, the International Dark Sky Association, the International Astronomical Union, as I mentioned, NSF NOIR Lab, the United Nations, Office for Outer Space Affairs, any number of other organizations, but these are some of the key ones. And particularly, I want to look at international-wise. One of the leaders in this area right now is the United Nations through its Office for Outer Space Affairs and COPUOS, which is the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. And actually what's going on right now is that UNUSA is having a conference, a Dark and Quiet Sky conference, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So I attended two conferences. UNUSA had a conference, the first conference on space law and policy. This issue was not raised. It was 2018. And even really the second conference that I attended in Turkey, the issue was really not raised, though obviously people were unofficially talking about it. But as I mentioned, right now, what's going on this week is the Dark and Quiet Sky workshop that is being provided by UNUSA through COPUOS and NOIR Lab. It's a group of working groups, separate groups addressing different issues related to light pollution. this is not just about satellites. It's about Copius basically said, we want a program on light pollution. And from what I learned today, that kind of directive came more from 2017, 2016, before even Starlink. So yesterday was talking about terrestrial light pollution, which I'll address shortly here. Today was talking about the ecology or bioenvironmental effect that occurs with light pollution. The working group that I was on was related to satellites, and that's on Thursday. Now, registration is closed. They asked us to promote it, and promote it we did, and they've had more than 1,000 people register for it, and they've closed the registration. But the videos will ultimately be available online, and if you want to take a quick screenshot or photo of the link below, that is where I believe you will find more information. That is the conferences or the workshops website, so it should be there. But the videos, the presentations should be there. And if you have any comments, get them back to me right away. We're going to talk about advocacy here in just a second. And one thing that I want to mention right now is that the working group initial reports, the reports will be up for comment, and anybody can comment on those. So look at them, take a look and a read if you're so interested, and provide comment, because that is what we're looking for. And that is particularly what they're looking for from all diverse groups, particularly here that I'm talking to amateur astronomy or astronomy organizations. So we kind of talked about the UNUSA and the United Nations. There's the International Telecommunications Union with respect to radio spectrum and satellites, the International Astronomical Union. But let's talk in the United States. What governs these satellites? What governs perhaps the light reflectivity of satellites? Well, on the latter point, the reflectivity, really nobody. There's nothing talking about it right now. But in terms of satellites, we have the FCC, the FAA, NOAA, the Department of State, Department of Commerce, Congress, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, congressional committees. So you have a wide number of agencies that can get even more complex than what I've just described. So what do you do? How do you get involved? Well, in the United States anyway, as I said, anytime somebody applies for a license, anytime that the FCC, the FAA proposes to modify regulations, it's open for public comment. So we're going to get to that. I'm going to walk you through how to find it and how to actually post your comments. The key is to be timely on that, because if they're posted after the deadline, it might accept it, but you might be able to post the comment, but it won't be considered. Another point is that the AAS does have a section on advocacy, not only its advocacy, but also how individuals can help. And I have some of the areas here, the Committee on Astronomy and Public Policy. There's a lot of information, again, at the AAS.org website. I recommend that you visit that. So let's look at FCC filings. So if you can see it here, it's fcc.gov/ECFS for, strangely enough, Electronic Comment Filing System. And if you go there, you are basically in the place that you are going to be able to comment on FCC matters. So what do we do? Well, as you see, it might be too small on your screen or too light, but I did put in Starlink, and so we can search the full text, and any number of, results come up. Right here on this search that I did, it was 44 results. Forget exactly what date this happened to be that I pulled this slide, but down here, you see that the preceding number, you can sort by different, date as descending, ascending. This is the received, the posted date. There's sometimes a delay, the title. So what we can do is when we look down, same search, I'm just looking down the screen, and we come down to here, International Bureau, the report. We're going to pull that up, and you see it's a report. You see these documents, you could click on each of them individually, or when you click on the International Bureau, you go to the report here and more information. You can again click on the documents. You can see the proceeding number, make sure that we're talking about the same thing, WC 19285, we are. And this talks about the date received, the date posted. This is good information. So what is this? Well, this was, as an example, it's not the Starlink application, but it was a 2020 broadband deployment report, and there was Starlink somewhere in here. The 19285, which matches 19285. So you can see the reports or the documents that have been filed. Before I go back to the ECFS and the comment there, the mechanism, I did want to suggest the other location where you can search more broadly for federal government documents, and that's the federalregister.gov. The Federal Register is where any of these notices are published. Before the internet, it was a bound document that you'd have to subscribe to and get, but now obviously with it being publicly accessible, it's all here. And again, you could put in, for example, here I put in orbital debris. It produces the results. You can sort just like before. And the particular result that I wanted to see was the mitigation of orbital debris in the new space age right here, April 23rd. So this pulls up the report. I can confirm this is what I might want to see, the FCC 2054, the docket number 18313 right here. So keep in mind more, I guess, the docket number. And then you can go back. So even though this was the Federal Register, the FCC documents are still there. But the reason why I wanted to point out the difference is you can only comment on FCC documents through the ECFS or sometimes by email directly to a particular FCC email address. Others, you can comment through the Federal Register, and I'm going to show you a better one in just a moment. But this is where we might be able to more quickly find what we're looking for. We were looking for orbital debris in this instance. I found the docket number. It's the FCC. I can go back to the proceeding. Here again, I'm at fcc.gov, ECFS. I'm looking for filings, so I'm going to be searching filings. I put in the docket number, and it pulls up. And actually with the ECFS, then it asks me to click or drop the files, PDF, or whatever it might be that I'm going to comment on. So if you go to filing, so we're no longer on the search, we're submitting a filing, we search for the proceeding, it comes up here, we click on that, and then it's going to give us the option to submit our comment. And anybody can do this. Anybody. You plug in something astronomy, plug in orbital debris, plug in Starlink, OneWeb, which is the other satellite company. It's in bankruptcy, but the UK is coming in and saving the day. You can search any of the terms and then find the docket number and get into a position where, here's the docket number again, get into a position where you're able to file a comment. Express comment, whoops. They do have an express comment where you're able to put in the information, and if you just want to put in brief comments, do so. So you don't even need to type up a broad document and formality. You can just put in your comments and move on. I wanted to also mention regulations.gov. Again, for the FCC, it's either through the ECFS or through an email address. And they will tell you, even if you find it through the federalregister.gov, or you find it here through regulations.gov, it'll tell you how you're going to need to comment. It'll say you need to go to ECFS. I've just told you how to find the ECFS. Or it'll say send an email here. Regulations.gov is beta, but it is the new and quick way to just put in a search term right at the top, kind of like a Google-esque, and get, we put in Starlink. Here are the results coming up. Whoops, sorry. We can explore those, look at NASA, get the documents that come up. And I'm not going to look at the FCC here because I kind of want, at least I don't think I'm showing you the FCC in a moment. I want to show you what regulations.gov has done to make it very easy to comment. So let's say NASA is a document we pulled up here. That's there. We pull up more information. We go to the document. It's a notice about Astronomy and Astrophysics Advisory Committee. There's really nothing to comment there, but it gives us the information. You can participate in these meetings. So again, just put in astronomy, go search. There might be a meeting that's worthwhile. You can participate in public meetings. But let's say that we were wanting to comment on something. And so this is something that I became involved in not too long ago, circling back to talking about Starlink and the light pollution and the environment. I'm leading into that. So the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, in the United States is the act that basically sets up environmental policy. Yes, we have the Environmental Protection Agency, but NEPA is the means by which the executive branch directs and espouses what the environmental policy would be. And the EPA is really to enforce that. They might come out with regulations, but they're getting the directive from NEPA, that act, and the Council on Environmental Quality. The Council on Environmental Quality, for better or for worse at this point in time, happens to be in the White House. So there were recent proposals to modify CEQ regulations. The CEQ regulations from NEPA basically direct all the other agencies how to conduct their policy. And let's say it might govern environmental impact statements. So they wanted to modify the NEPA CEQ regulations. And if you looked at the proposed regulations, arguably they were trying to make it less burdensome for companies to overcome environmental hurdles. You might disagree or agree with that position. I'm not going to get into that here. My concern was that this is an opportune time to have the CEQ regulations talk about the dark skies, the night sky as part of the environment for the FCC. Because like on the FCC applications, I should have had that in here. If you go to the FCC application for Starlink, there is a question, will this mission have any impact on the environment? What do you think they answered? I can hear you all say it. They answered no. That was kind of why some people said, hey, let's sue SpaceX. They said no. But if you look at the regulations, the FCC, the last time that the FCC looked at what is the environment for our purposes, I think it was 1986. It was a long time ago. And their perspective is that most of what the FCC does has nothing to do with the environment. Maybe we've got to talk about the use of things on native lands. Maybe we talk about some radioactive sludge that might come out. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much. That's what the FCC perceives as the environmental scope of what it has to worry about. And so I thought, hey, since the CEQ had proposed modifying its regulations through NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, what an opportunity to say, let's modify those rules and look at the dark sky, the night sky as part of the environment. So there were two opportunities for testimony, one in Denver, one in Washington, D.C. I was able to get in to the one in Washington, D.C. I flew out there, I attended. You can attend without any problem, but to speak, I kind of didn't make the cutoff, but I was able to sneak in, and I was the last speaker. You can find my testimony out there somewhere. You can, very brief, maybe just a few minutes. They cut you off, but you can Google MUD, NEPA, CEQ. But I did the testimony. Then I started talking about it, and some of my colleagues and friends with the International Dark Sky Association and I started talking, and we developed a comment, or drafted a comment, that had our written perspective that we ended up submitting as a comment through this process. So here's the update to regulations and implementing the procedural provisions of NEPA. The comments you can see were received more than 1 million, and that could be a formal comment like we did, or it could just be something that somebody comments. Because again, this is not the FCC. So there's the one that I did with the International Dark Sky Association. And one of the comments here is that somebody commented that to put our work into perspective, this is from the astronomy community. A few years ago, I visited the U.S. Senate committee staffers to urge astronomy funding, and the chief staffer for the committee said, "We love you astronomers, but we hear from you only once a year. I get a call from Lockheed Martin every day." Let's just think about that. That's the reason that I'm talking to you here today. That's the reason that I think it's important that anybody that loves the night sky, anybody that loves astronomy, anybody who's passionate about space, comment. I can tell you that those million comments were not all companies. They're not all, or they're individuals as well, like you. You can get on there and comment and make it known. Let's change it so that they do hear from the astronomy community every day and not just once a year. So I'm sorry?
We have a question from Facebook.
Yeah, sure.
So Chris asks, he says, I assume a judge would look at harm. What would be the basis for the harm claim? What precedence is there for public views being obstructed by business ventures, say like road signs blocking scenic views?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And right now, I think that it would be very difficult to make a harm with the night sky in this context. It would be a very difficult argument to make that we were somehow interfering with a business, or let's say an observatory where there's commercial interest in astronomy and so forth, because there's no law against it. Well, let me take that back. So I would argue that under NEPA, which I was just talking about, and the FCC regulations, the FCC interpreted the CEQ regulations. I think that the CEQ regulations are broad enough, perhaps really stretching it, but broad enough to encompass the night sky as part of the environment. And therefore, that the FCC would have to impose or require companies to talk about the environmental impact. That doesn't mean that they can't do it. It doesn't mean that they couldn't launch a satellite. They would have to talk about the effect that would have. Right now, the FCC's interpretation from its perspective, nobody's told it different. So there's really not a violation there. Under international law, there's an argument implicit, and again, stretching the language of the Outer Space Treaty, that any state party, which means any country, has an obligation to make sure that anything that it launches or has launched within its government or jurisdiction, whether it's a person or a juridical person, which is a company. So anybody within its jurisdiction, it's responsible for, that that pays attention to the common heritage of space and the interests of all mankind or people kind. And so there's some argument from the international community, other countries, that wait a second, SpaceX is launching this from the US, and that's affecting us over in Chile. or Australia or Antarctica, where all these observatories are outside the United States, and so they arguably are violating the Outer Space Treaty. But beyond that, there's really no laws here making an argument that it's interfering with business operations and so forth. And so while there might be plausible theories, nobody's even applied those theories or tested them. And in my mind, what we really need to do is change the regulations to make it much more explicit. Very good question, and it drives home the point that right now there's nothing stopping them from doing anything. I mean, SpaceX isn't violating the law right now. In fact, it obtained a license for the FCC to do exactly what it's doing. And it doesn't even have to participate with the astronomers in trying to mitigate the light. Other companies have not shown so much interest. Good comment, good question. So here, if we go back to, just for a moment, regulations.gov, you pull up what you might be interested in commenting on, and it pulls it up. Here's a rule. You have the information, post a date, and you just have a quick link to comment. It'll take you to the comment page. And right there on the bottom, you can drop a file. Whoops. You can drop a file, or you can start commenting. So through regulations.gov, it's really easy to find things, put in the search terms, find them, and see if you're able to comment and do. I would make your thoughts worthwhile, but, I mean, it doesn't have to be a formal document. So, all right, we've talked a lot, and I fear that I'm running out of time. So I'm going to go through a little bit, and then I'll open it up all for questions at the end. So I argue with the CEQ that light pollution, that the dark skies are an environmental issue, both on the terrestrial side and the space side. I really do believe that the night sky is part of the environment, and more than humans use the stars to navigate. So, as I said, I did that through NEPA, and with the International Dark Sky Association, we submitted a formal document. I also found that the United Nations Environment Program was preparing for UNEA 5, its conference coming up next year, and sought comments about what should be considered. So I took the opportunity that arguing that the unblemished night sky is a critical component of Earth's environment. I submitted a letter on my own behalf arguing those. I'm happy to share them if you want to reach out to me. So the reason that I mention that is advocacy. Look for the opportunities. Look at the opportunities for reaching out. Now, those two things I did as a lawyer, but anybody can comment through the government sites, the U.S. government site. So we need to make sure and advocate that the environment includes the night sky. Another aspect of that is orbital or space debris. We really don't have the time to play this. This is, but this just gives you an idea. These are kind of a real representation modeling, but based on a real representation of what the space debris objects are that exist right now around our wonderful and beautiful Earth. And so, going back to the question, not so much laws right now, but there are with space debris. And one of the things that can compel companies to come to the table is when we talk about dollars and cents. One way that we can get the government to come to the table and the representatives and senators is dollars and cents. So if we talk about the numbers, the money that's invested in astronomy, and how, let's say at the Vera Rubin Observatory, Starlink is really going to mess things up and potentially lose the large investment that's been made, that's a way to trigger. We might get some people talking about the environment, but not everybody. Here's another quick example of this is when the Indian government tested its anti-satellite technology. And what it did is it exacerbated immensely the space debris issue. So this is another argument why we need to be considering the orbital space around Earth as part of the environment. We can also look at human history, and that light pollution is an environmental issue. I don't have time to look through this, but there's right now, today, again, going to dark and quiet skies, looking for those presentations, you will see today was all about the effect of terrestrial light pollution on bioecology, bioenvironment, really immense things, definitely a key issue. It talks about the light actually having an impact on cancer in humans, animals, insects, not necessarily cancer on animals and insects, but I highly recommend it. So, light pollution, there's sky glow. We need to look at light ordinances, model codes. You all may know that Homer Glen has been recognized by the International Dark Sky Association as a dark sky place here in Illinois, which is great because there aren't that many. Right now, I'm trying more locally to advocate for a lighting ordinance. There are a couple of interested people working with me on doing that. And obviously that's Adler Planetarium. I'm not suggesting that they are involved at all. It's just that's kind of where I took the photo from. And I wanted to bring home the point that here, what we would plan on doing, the people that I'm working with, independent of Adler, independent of the city so far, is like creating a dark sky space around the Adler Planetarium so that the observatory there has, maintains the full potential. So that's a lot of information. My bottom line is that I want to say that there are opportunities for all of us to advocate for the night sky, dark skies, whether that's through the government, the United States government, and commenting on regulatory proposals or FCC license applications, looking for conferences, participating in something like the Dark and Quiet Sky, which was open to the public, no cost. There are other opportunities to become involved. I'm trying to advocate, and one of the ways is talking to you all here. I want to again thank the Naperville Astronomical Association for having me. And I want to thank you for listening and indulging me as I talk about something that hopefully you see that I'm passionate about, and I'm happy to open it up to any questions.
We have one more question on Facebook. Chris is basically asking who's the best advocates in Congress for this topic.
That's a really good question, and there are committees that are looking at it, and there are senators and representatives, and I'm happy to pass those along offline because I don't have the list with me right now. But that also brings up a good point in that whether they are favorable for it or not, the most impact that you're going to have in Congress is on your own representative and senator. You can call, Maine's senator, or you can call Alaska's senator and tell them what you think should be done, but they're not going to be paying attention to you as much as their own citizens. So you should call ours here, or your representative where you are, the senators here, and advocate and say that these are important issues and that they should be paying attention to that. What I'm planning on doing on my end is coming up with a more frequent kind of a policy update. On one hand, I've also thought about creating a policy advocacy group, not so much like was perhaps mentioned before, but I signed those letters through my law firm, my business, but I think it would be better in some circumstances to do it through an advocacy group. And so I'm looking at that. But regardless, if you stay in touch, if you go to our website, I do have the ability to have you subscribe to our space newsletter, which will be talking about a number of different things. But I want to get that information out to you. And I want to hear from you as to what information you believe would be valuable. But just to conclude, from the front lines, I mean, there's a lot of people talking about the satellites during this week, but there's a lot of concern out there that we're not going to be able to persuade the powers that be. We need to be looking at this from an international level. So Dark and Quiet Skies is going to take the comments and the feedback, and that's actually going to go to a report to copious before the UN, and then possibly ultimately go something before the UN General Assembly. If you want to have a part in that, play a part in that, go to the website for the conference, the workshop, and read the documents and offer your comments. They're looking for this perspective. Indeed, yesterday's perspective was just on terrestrial light pollution, and one of the people that was talking was John Barentine from the International Dark Sky Association. So that's what we need to do policy-wise internationally. Domestically here in the United States, we can't wait for rules to come from the United Nations or guidelines. The last time that a space treaty came out of the United Nations, a treaty, there are other documents, but the last time a space treaty came out, that would have been a good question to ask and get a poll. But 1979, it was open for signature, and that's the Moon Agreement, and we're not even a part of the Moon Agreement. I don't have time to talk about all that, but so we can't wait for the United Nations to do anything, but we need to push them. We need to push here, Congress, the regulatory bodies. I've just shown you how to do that. You need to reach out locally, look at the light ordinances, participate in these kind of discussions, and support your organization like the Naperville Astronomical Association. Applaud for people that come and speak to you about these issues, and reach out. I'm happy to talk about things. I'm happy to pass along information for people. We need your participation because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy getting the regulations to protect the night sky from this kind of light pollution. But final point, there are already regulations that govern protecting radio astronomy, which also the Starlink satellites have an effect on. So there are already regulations relating to radio astronomy and protecting certain radio frequencies for radio astronomy. There are already regulations that are getting more robust for space debris. In fact, the final comment period for one is coming up at the end of the week, October 9th. So there's no reason why we can't bring in the light pollution, solar reflectivity into that discussion. Do we have any other questions?
No, there are no more questions.
All right, well, then I will be happy to turn it over. And I know it was kind of an unorthodox discussion from what might usually be presented here, and talking about the exciting discussions about telescopes and technology and viewing and what's out there and so forth. But again, I really appreciate you all listening to me, bearing with me, and again, to the NAA, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you very much, Charles. That was really informative, I got to say. And I just wanted to note that writing to the FCC, I've done that during the net neutrality argument. So it is really a simple process to have your voice heard. And that's what it's good to hear, that as amateur astronomers, we do have an avenue where we can let people know what we think of all this. So thank you for informing us on that.
You're welcome.
Sure thing. We're going to start our business meeting now. Before I turn over to Kathy, I just want to remind everybody again, two things. One is the committee for the Constitution. Basically, again, we've registered as a 5013C, and there are a few things in our Constitution that need to be changed because of that, and we need a committee. And would like anybody who would like to volunteer to serve on it to send an email to info@naperastro.org. There it is. Oops, no, that's not quite it. Jim's getting to it. There you go. info@naperastro.org. And you'll be doing all your meetings electronically because of the restrictions we're on these days. The other thing I just wanted to mention again real quickly, since I didn't give Kathy a report from the Vice President, I just want to talk a couple of minutes. If you all saw the email to the group that came out from Drew today about the AEC work, like I said earlier, we're pretty much done with it. And what happened was we ripped out all the old siding, put new siding in, painted it. We've added a gutter to the top of the movable door. We added a entrance door right to the room where the DVO is at, so that when we do get back to having public nights, people can walk right into there instead of going through the office. We can keep the office closed, and the climate controls situations there will stay the same for the library. I'm trying to think what else we've done there. There was the door that it was a lot of work. It really was. And again, thanks to the gang that did it. There's the picture. Thank you, Jim. It was a lot of work. It wasn't very easy work. Some of it, if you see where all the electrical panels are and the transformer and everything, that was a lot of fun getting that off the wall so we could take the old paneling out, put new paneling in. But we're real happy about the look of it now. We hope the paint would match the GDRO building. I took a sample of the siding to Home Depot, and they ran it through their magic machine, and this stuff's a little bit more yellow. But next time you're out there, you'll be able to see it, and hope everybody enjoys not looking at it, but enjoys the work that was put into it and understands what was done out there. The other thing I just wanted to say real quick, remember again, November meeting will be the 10th of November, not the first Tuesday because of the election. They'll be using that room for voting. And hope everybody has a good night. And I think for the members, Drew did send out an email for the after meeting if you want to get together and just talk. Have a good time there. I won't be able to join. I'm a little beat. I'm going to rest. So good night, everybody.